Доброго дня, шановні
Morning. Welcome to our crisis center. We begin our press briefings, and we have a very tense day, Friday, and we begin with a very important issue which we discussed many times here in our center about lustration. We'll speak about an international dimension and international experience, of lustration and how to apply it in Ukraine. And I will speak to Yegor Sobolev, who is the head of Lustration Committee and a member of VOLIA party, and Lyudmyla Kozlovska, president for Open Dialogue Foundation. As you know, Ukraine now is preparing seriously to consider and to approve the law on purification or cleaning the authorities. It will be the second front against corruption and those who participate in sabotage, who are betrayers of the country, and who are linked to the first front. That is the linked. And the corruption which begins on the level of the Housing Committee it brings it to betrayers in the General Staff and the Ministry of Defense staff, and that's why our best heroes are victims of that. Now, all as a society, without exaggeration, is waiting for approval of this law, and many MPs do everything for this draft law not to be approved. And one of the ideas which was read by Hanna Herman from the Party of Regions is to talk around this draft law through appealing to international organizations during the last meeting of MPs, and they suggested let's study the international experience. I would like to inform MPs that international experience was learned a long time ago. They did know this, but the Foundation Open Dialogue in April organized a fantastic conference in Kiev, and with a representative from all the countries that had lustration, even from Slovenia, who did not have that experience, and they told us to do it because we feel that it's bad if you don't do it, and more of that. The Great Foundation Open Dialogue in Poland organized a translation of our draft law to 8 languages and sent it to 25 European experts, just for them, not just to introduce international experience, but to assess our ideas, how efficient they are, how they deserve attention, how to improve them. Lyudmyla is a person who organized that great work together with her colleagues. Let's listen to what international experts advise. And thank you very much for your introduction. I will speak Russian with your permission. First of all, I would like to say that our foundation directly monitored the situation from the very beginning of events in Kiev in 2013 in autumn, and from the beginning of Euromaidan, and that's why we understand why Ukrainian society asks and demands lustration. In addition to all of that, our main task was to support a Lustration Committee and NGOs, because it doesn't have real instruments of Ukrainian authorities to conduct this process, to implement it. And I would like to say that our experts from more than 8 European countries, including, and also express gratitude to Polish Institute of National Memory, Lustration Committee, and co-author of Czech Law of Lustration, and the first director of Institute on Totalitarian Regime Studies in Prague, and of Alex from Association of Young Lawyers of Georgia, representatives of academic circles from Hong Kong, and the representative from Warsaw University, representatives from the European Council of Lawyers in Poland, and Helsinki Foundation on Human Rights, and also express gratitude to representatives of French Council of Lawyers who monitored and that this draft law meets international standards. This group of people, and of 8, and 9 people, sorry, and they work pro bono, and also they work on this draft law. In addition to that, we express gratitude to experts from Estonian Law Center and our MPs from European Parliament, coordinators of our foundation, who organized that process, and Yevgeny Sokin and Natalia, who are present here, all experts of international level. They understand that that process and of the first reading, the law on lustration, that's a political process. It's not an ideal law. Everybody understands. It's very important that representatives of Lustration Committee of NGOs and MPs, and they are ready to work transparently on improvement of this draft law. I have to say, the majority of participants understand that this is impossible without participation of Ukrainian society. That's why a great role belongs to mass media, how you cover these events, what kind of recommendations were made by our experts, and property or assets of family, and that part should be improved in the law. Also, we have to think about time of checks or examination or periodic examinations, appeal instances in case of a negative examination, and there is a need to look at catalog of community services like general development of Euro and military service of USSR, collective responsibility, and also it's important to consider the basics, foundations, and basics for examination of those who work in the communist special service, and there should be a body who is responsible for examination and who with outlined procedures, clearly outlined. But innovations, and one of the most important, highly appreciated point in this draft law is public control and involvement of international supervisors or monitors, all experts who participated in the work of on this draft law. They said there is no country that had illustration or tried to have illustration didn't use that tool, and that tool can provide to Ukraine a real instrument of cleaning the authorities, but not a tool of taking revenge. And so it can. So Russian propaganda cannot blame us that this is there are political motivations under this, and we would like to underline that we express a lot of gratitude to politicians, activists, journalists who participate directly in realistic steps of introduction of this reform and cleaning Ukrainian authorities. And despite the argument there is the war in the country, you understand quite well that this is an opinion of international experts, that a decision about future of Ukraine depends on urgency and necessity, and necessity to understand that it's important to have illustration in Ukrainian society. Why? Because there are four main problems: effects of robbing, or of stealing. This is corruption practice of using money that were collected by public money of Ukrainian society in ministries, including Ministry of Defense, and so that those assets were not used properly. And like bulletproof vests, they were bought of low quality, and it means that they risk their life of our soldiers, or there are those who practice sabotage, and they are members of the government. Violation of embargo for military cooperation of Russia between Russia and Ukraine. De facto, many companies continue sending supplies, military equipment to Russia. How possible? How is that possible? So we need the process of cleaning, and that's the second proof. And we should stop the practice of cooperation between general prosecution of Ukraine with Russian Federation, Kazakhstan, and other countries of CIS to prosecution of political opponents who de facto use Ukraine as an instrument of abusing mechanism through Interpol, international investigation, and either political motivated demands during extradition. And the last point, broad practice of using parliamentary immunity by the majority of MPs of Ukraine as an instrument for getting away from responsibility, criminal responsibility, administrative and economic responsibility. So, in de facto, it's they deviate punishment for corruption schemes. And the bright example is Sergei Kivala. Why? Because he is the head of the committee on the rule of law and justice. That person is obliged to realize that practice, but he's one of the most corrupted people in Ukraine. He is also a representative of Ukraine in the Venice Commission, which is a key body for reform of the constitution of Ukraine. How that person can be responsible for such issues. As the head of, and there is a story that as the former head of the Central Election Commission, he was responsible for massive falsifications of results of presidential elections. And he was one of the preconditions why Orange Revolution took place. And because very often we would like to underline on behalf of international experts who cooperate with us, and we thank them again, that all criticism at this draft law, everybody understands that it's not ideal. That's why Lustration Committee and international experts invite all to broad discussion and to work on this law. We would like to mention that this draft law is not a violation of the resolution of the Council of Europe, number 1066 from 1996, which completely refuses and is not a tool of persecution and is not a political instrument of settling accounts with political opponents. Thank you.
Thank you, Yegor. Thank you, Lyudmyla. Any questions? Then I will start as the moderator. How now will the recommendations be used? We submitted all the recommendations. You have the press release where each one of them is briefly described. This are more than 40 pages document. We submitted to Lustration Committee. Our representative Agnieszka works in working groups. As soon as there are new recommendations, then they continue this work. Next Tuesday, there will be more and more recommendations submitted. Whatever we get, we transfer to the committee, and we see the real steps and the desire from the Lustration Committee to implement them. But it is very important for political forces to cooperate in that, because Lustration Committee has not received any instruments to address all these issues. The position of the civil society, the position of Ukrainians is so important to make this law a reality. My question is to Yegor, how to make it a reality. There's a draft law approved in the first reading. On the other hand, there are 40 pages opinion of experts. What's next? How to achieve it, that the parliament approves what they want, so that this is submitted for the second reading, so that it's approved as the law. How long can this process last? We work with everyone who wants to work. There are two parallel meetings. The experts get together They present their opinion. Those who live in Ukraine via the Open Dialogue Fund, we get the opinion of those who live outside of Ukraine. We took into account one amendment of international experts at the stage of drafting the law. First, we had an idea to use polygraph, but the international experts expressed the doubt whether this will be efficient norm, whether this will correspond to European norms of human rights, so we removed that. At the same time, we negotiate with the parliamentarians. We want all the parliamentarians express themselves so that they write amendments, and then Parliament openly should vote for all the amendments and for the law. Our idea is not to delay it, because there might be an idea of delay the approval of the law. We believe that it is critically important to get that law from this parliament, because this parliament has many debts to the Ukrainian society. They at least have to to pay back one debt. This law on cleaning the authorities, by the end of August, we submitted, and we want the parliament to approve the law on lustration on the 4th of September. And the citizens will come to help the parliament to make wise decisions. So once you send that draft to the experts and you are looking forward to get amendments, well, we're discussing. Every day we have these meetings. I came here from the meeting with the representative of one of the biggest factions, and we discussed their ideas. What I would like to tell people, we have a realistic chance to force the parliament to vote for that law. Even those MPs who were laughing at us, who were saying, you are doing it for your personal PR, they say, yeah, we understand that you will get this law passed. Let's introduce such and such amendments. Now it's in the hands of the Ukrainian citizens to force the authorities to approve the law on purging the authorities. And it is important for everyone to be on the 4th of September near the parliament from the early morning. And what about recommendations? Is there consensus among Ukrainian and foreign experts as to amendments? That's impossible. Lustration is always the restriction of human rights. That's always the destiny of many people. Our law is very radical. It provides for lustration of different layers. We are suggesting anti-communist lustration, which we did not do in the beginning of the 90s, like many countries in Europe. Then we suggest the lustration anti-corruption, anti-Putin lustration, because we see that it's a huge threat when his agents are present in our authorities. I draw attention to the position of General Shutov, who's responsible for planning all the operations of the armed forces. This is the relative of the Minister of Defense Lebedev, who went to Russia after the events we all know. I drew attention to Colonel General Ilyashov, who was heading the External Intelligence Service, and he was the main channel of the influence of FSB, and he's still the Colonel General of Ukraine, and also the head of the Chernigiv Department of Security Service. He was connected to Yakimenko, another guy who went away to Russia, and he was heading the security service. And his assistant is now heading the Department of Security Service in Chernihiv Oblast, which is so important for ensuring national security of the state, because if Putin takes regular forces into Ukraine, then in Chernihiv becomes a very important place. We offered to remove all people who were related to the KGB. Even Nalyvaichenko falls under that law. So with such proposals, we understand that we have many enemies and we have many ideas. There are experts who say that this law is too radical. There are those who say that it's not enough radical, and we need to remove everyone who was in the authority starting from 1991. That's normal. Any serious decision would always have many supporters and many opponents. I believe that that's the requirement of time. We cannot, without lustration, we cannot survive. I don't say to implement reforms. We will not survive. Those people who die in Donbass for this country, they are shouting about it. They're shouting even from the graves, because many operations were not failed because of the sabotage, because of subversive activity of the agents, and that law is written by the blood of our soldiers. We have to approve it. I agree with you absolutely, because the events happening in Ukraine, they require from us to speed up our reactions and our actions. The recommendation of the experts, that's not just the recommendation of the experts, but that's recommendation from the point of view of international law. Without the proven guilt of a person, the person cannot be removed from certain position. We know how long the process of proving the guilt could last in Ukraine. We can understand that such people may hold positions for long. Maybe we need to implement some more radical actions. For more radical actions, we need to explain to the international community, when they listen to Russian propaganda, they believe that any action of lustration is exclusively political persecution in Ukraine. For that, we need the experts who work on lustration. The role of politicians and mass media is to explain abroad why we need it and why you believe it's so. I'm sorry, what you know about how lustration was taking place in other countries. How can we judge what they need if we do not have the facts? Give the facts to international experts. They will be happy to see them and they will support. But we need very specific arguments. And our role as a fund is to be the platform to get the international experts together, the experts who are so important, so that they know why Ukrainian society applies certain criteria during lustration. And that is what Ukrainian society is to be doing now, to explain to Europe why we need it and how we are planning to do that. And that is what Ukrainian Crisis Media Center is doing. No questions. Thank you, Yegor. Thank you, Lyudmyla. See you on the 4th of September near the Parliament. The 4th of September.